Well, good evening, everybody. Very pleased to say that I have Mr. Fleetside back with me for the second part of his presentation. It's very nice to have you on. Welcome to tonight's presentation, which is your presentation of some excellent work. I've read through the questions. Welcome, and how's it going?
Very good, thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Now, you were telling me that you were gigging last night in your band, so I'm going to hazard a guess as to because I don't know what instrument it is you play, and I can't see any clues, so I'm going to have to guess. So I'm going to start, if you like, from the sort of like as a musician from the bottom upwards, you know. I'm suspecting that you don't play cowbell.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm not thinking anything percussion at all. Actually, I'm not even thinking drums. And we know that drums are a bit of a, you know. Yeah, I'm not, you know, next level up, I would say would be, you know, like severe wind instruments, brass instruments, because they only play one note at a time. That's all they can do is play. They are only monophonic, whereas your bass player is the next level up, you know. So I'm just wondering, could be bass, but that would no. I'm going to have to either go with keyboards or guitar, but which one to go for? I'm going to hazard a guess and say guitar.
Yeah, I think using your powers of deductive reasoning. Not only that, but we could do a international gig if you ever want.
Oh, definitely, yes. I've got just the guy for us on cowbell.
Okay,
with his musical talents, he would be perfect on cowbell. Trust me.
I've got access to a recording guy that can take the feeds in and mix them. So.
Excellent.
Something we can think about.
Absolutely. In fact, I know that the guy on cowbell is interested. Your fellow countryman Stacey Seabrook.
Yeah.
One of his songs is "The Truce Train."
Yeah.
What he would particularly like would be for supporters to get together and record their little bits of singing along with the Stacey Seabrook's Truth Train, and to put it together so that everybody, a little bit like here in the UK, we've had these various comic reliefs and aid stuff, and one of them was where they had a load of different people singing on you know, what was the song? It was the
We Are the World, or
yeah, it was the Lou Reed song, the slow one.
Oh,
very slow body one. Perfect day. Just a perfect day. Drink sangria in the park. Well, it's been a while since I've drank sangria in the park, but never mind. Without any further ado, really great to have you back on again. You wouldn't believe the number of people that have got in touch with me and said, "Wow, that was amazing, that presentation that Fleetside put on," because it really is very, very interesting. I must admit, from my point of view, it would answer so many questions. But I'm just going to shut up and let you take over because I thought that was it. Oh, just one thing I did want to find out. You mentioned the word parsimony.
Yeah.
And for me, it reminds me of parsons, which are the sort of clerical people that go around the UK. But could you just elaborate parsimony?
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually get into that in the presentation, if that's okay. Because it is a critical piece of how we're statusing which camp we're in, and so that is one of the central themes in the discussion. So let's certainly get to that.
Okay.
If I could defer that just to the part within, yeah. So do you want me to jump through the gates and?
Yes, please do.
Flying through the eye of the hurricane.
Absolutely.
So as for the comments on the good work, or however you put that, So clearly, I'm piggybacking on the backs of others in our analytic community who have done a stellar job, and it makes it easy to try and put the pieces together and attempt to make a point here today. I've got little notes at my side here, so if I get distracted, but so I called this part two. Two truths are told. Borrowed that from this guy called Shakespeare, who
yes,
apparently was a good writer. So, but it's apropos the sort of two camps we'll get into. But just to preface this whole thing, the spirit and intent is to promote efficiency and the great work that others are doing, the work that's underway. Obviously, try to enhance and further the truther objective, which in turn is seeking justice for Steve Napier and Brendan Dassey, and hopefully while collaterally raising a modicum of respect for the diversity in our ranks, suggesting that the diversity of opinion is good. And ultimately, I think that may bring us to closer unification. So for this one, Two Truths Are Told, the agenda I was going to run through is a 7-part, and that would be the first slide of the we've got a magic slide deck and relying on Paul's command of the technology to transfer.
you are, hey, careful, he that expecteth nothing, This is, let me see if this will work then. So if we do that, and then I click on this one here, that should do the trick. How's that for you?
That is it. Yep, that's good.
Excellent.
So that's the first slide. So what I was going to do is run through these 7 sections, and and I've got a question or two at the end of each section to ponder, and it would be questions that I would pose to the truther community. Now, obviously, it's going to be impractical during this podcast to work that, but this could either be rhetorical in nature, where one can pull 1 or 2 of them away, and could be a future podcast alone with others than myself talking. So the 7. First of all, I want to start in section 1 to review our podcast. We did a podcast part 1 on March 3rd, 2020.
Yes.
And second section, analytic observations on the size of our quest here. So I was going to introduce some terminology, macro and micro lens.
Yes.
Third section, I was going to review probity and analysis and versus inferior facsimiles. I'll unpack that and explain the terminology. In section 4, I wanted to get to the macro lens considerations in the alive or not theories. And then section 5, analyzing and interpreting. There's a slogan out there, work through K Zed, as a sort of slogan that's been promoted. And I think it's an interesting one, and I wanted to try and park a thought in there if I could, use that as a placeholder for a thought. Section 6, potential consequence of under-targeting. What happens if we aim too low? And I'll wind up with some conclusions, and I'll give you my personal answers to the questions that I'll pose.
Sure.
And Paul, you may, not to put you on the spot, but by all means, chime in as well as you.
Yes,
see fit.
Absolutely.
So the first piece, review of our last podcast. It was called Making a Murder, an Analysis of Truther Analyses, Part 1.
Yep.
It was March 3rd, 2020. So as we had discussed within that, truthers are objective inquisitors, we like to think, and guilters are selling an interest. So what I would suggest is, notwithstanding the guilty versus non-guilty division between them, I think our appropriate use of analytic method, sound analytic method versus the alternative is apparent in dividing the two teams. Within the truther camp, we identified a dozen or so different views, all good views with slight differences. A major division we talked about was the death and alive camps, so two
Yes.
different camps. And we got into this idea of analyzing the micro, whether on the one camp, the truther community is looking in the microsphere at a murder that happened in 2005, or an accident. Some have different variants on the theme. But the microcosm of the macrosphere is looking at Manitowoc County in October 31, 2005, and the instances of the whodunit, what happened.
Sure.
Now, the other school of thought is in the macro universe, and there we see a pattern of a vendetta, a pre-1985 vendetta against Avery. Then we see an incarceration. We saw an exoneration. Yeah. We noted a conflict of interest after that exoneration, followed by an incarceration again. And we noticed a lot of subterfuge heading to what we think is the next exoneration.
Absolutely.
So that's sort of a run through in a nutshell. So that people don't have to walk through the whole hour there. They can sort of look at that synopsis. But so the question for this section that I was going to propose for truthers, so question 1A, that would be the next slide, probably.
Absolutely. You keep me right. I shall scroll down. So here we go. Question 1. Yeah.
I'll kill the suspense by telling you what's there. Question 1A is the coincidence of the derailment of the depositions and the avoidance of the Avery bill by name and the conflict of interest in the lawsuit an acceptable wager? By that I mean, is it okay to take all that off the table and focus on a smaller analysis? Mm-hmm. That's question 1A, and we'll unpack these later and talk them through. 1B, if not, in your mind, could this reasonably have been planned or pre-planned, in other words?
Yes. Yeah.
So I'll leave those as questions for a moment and then go on to the...
Can I write down my answers as I go along? So
yes, you can.
Question 1, I'm going to say... I'm going to say B. I think it definitely could have been planned.
Yeah. So that would suggest something larger than events in the microsphere in October 31 of 2005.
Yeah.
I mean, not holding you to a position other than you've got a door open to that possibility. Mm-hmm. You're not closed on that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So then, I'll get my answers in the end, but and the right answer is no. Will
I get marks?
Yeah, no. There's no right answers.
Exactly.
It's all the spirit of discussion. So this the second section, analytic observations. So with the Gilters, we are also, as with the Gilters, we are first and foremost a social community.
Yes.
So to suggest that we're analytically sound and pure would be a stretch. We've certainly witnessed in the Gilter community what I would call a veritable potpourri of analytic malfeasance as the underpinning of their position. But we're not immune to that on our side either. We need to bear in mind there can be some foibles. I think we are in stark contrast to them in that regard, but we're not without our, we're not perfect either. And so in general, what I've observed in a lot of discussions, we promote the positives of our pet theories. That's only human nature. We are less forthright on the detractors to our theories and the alternative interpretations. And we tend to persuade followers to align with our point of view, again, human nature. And we thus can walk down this road of competing for ideas. And that's all good and normal, healthy. That's to be human. As I said last presentation, science is not pretty, and the truth is not pretty. So
No.
it's normal to have a diversity of views and to compete for those ideas. The question behind that is whether we're dealing with this thing I refer to as sociolytics versus analytics. So this is a term that I think I coined. I don't know whether it exists. I'm sure somebody's come up with something either the same or similar. But by that I mean our derivations, our analytic derivations, are curbed by social necessity or benefit. So if we follow an etiquette to get to the answer, what we should be thinking versus where our mind tells us to go.
Yeah, I think in fairness, we as truthers can be at times guilty of the kind of tunnel vision because that's what we want it to be. I definitely see that. Yes. Yeah.
So for sure. So admitting, we're admitting our foibles. I think that's good and healthy as well. So what I've noticed is there tends to be a skew toward the simplicity of the depth theories in this whodunit, very much akin to, maybe that's out of interest in like a Sherlock Holmes novel or something.
Yes.
But it's something that causes us to gravitate to that. And just to be clear, those could be right.
Mm-hmm.
No, right. But the alternative is less represented, and to me appears to be sort of socially shunned, if I can put it that way.
Yep.
That this is the Monty Python, I think I mentioned in one of my writings, the People's Front of Judea versus the Judean People's Front, as if there are two communities struggling for identity within the same. Gotta love Monty Python. So the micro posture, the challenge I have in that is the inconsistency between that closed analysis and the totality of all the other analyses that have been done by the truther community that would seem to point to the undermining of the integrity of a larger system, the probity that we're relying on in the system.
Yeah.
Now, the macro posture, on the other hand, fits the breadth and depth of the manipulation. So that doesn't mean it's right. That just means in terms of data points, it fits elegantly, and on those grounds serves as a compelling reason to look.
Yeah.
So we had the vendetta, the incarceration, the exoneration, the conflict of interest, another incarceration, the subterfuge, which is ongoing today, and headed to the next exoneration. So in my view, there's a 40-year elephant in the room we need to look at. And this idea of the subterfuge ongoing today. So if I can call this a crime, the crime we're investigating in the macro sense isn't the vestiges of something of 1985 or 2005. It is very much alive and well today.
Yeah.
And just has reached back to those 40 years. So the question in section 2, are you observing and analyzing in the micro theater or in the macro? And if you are on the micro, so question 2B, and it's a 3-parter, if you're looking at that smaller vision, and again, remembering that could in fact be correct, I'm not criticizing, is it reasonable to ignore the larger picture in your analysis, to take that 40-year elephant in the room off the table so that you have the convenience of focusing in this piece alone? Is the basis, and we're going to get to your favorite word, parsimony.
Yes, thank you.
So is the basis of your micro reasoning due to, I call it parsimony, but could have the accent on the wrong syllable. Is the basis for micro reasoning due to parsimony? If so, is that a sufficient basis to lower the horizon of inquiry? And I'm going to expand on that in the follow-on.
Yeah. I mean, are you observing and analyzing in the micro or macro theater? I would definitely say the macro. B, is it reasonable to ignore that larger picture? No, I think we have to look at absolutely everything that's going on, is the basis for micro-reasoning due to parsimony or par.
Yeah, and given that you're not there, it might not be applicable to you, but more generally, is that reasonable to use parsimony, as you say, to reduce this to the micro level?
Yeah. I would say yes. I'm very much of the opinion that there could well be a very, very simple explanation as to what's going on, and it could well be this bigger picture. It's the basis for micro reasoning due to. Yeah, absolutely. If so, is that a sufficient?
So just to put some context to that. So, for example, if you're of the mind that you don't believe in conspiracy theories, therefore you're taking that larger picture, that could be your rationale. So that I included within the parsimony equation, the idea of would they do, would the system do that, or how many people would have to be in on it, or I don't believe in conspiracies generally. Those would be part of that grounding. And the question there is that sufficient given what we know of the system? And, I would leave that as a question. We're going to obviously fly in a little closer on that. So the next section is section 3, review of probity and analysis. So this word probity, not often used in the English language, but intended to mean of sound moral principle, honest, non-corrupt, fair, upright. So as an example, would you say that the investigators in this case and or the legal system that's opined to date are acting with probity? And I would assume the truther community writ large would sort of suggest not. It's almost an integrity with individuals. You call it integrity and probity for systems. So that's the word I'm shooting for in a way, probity. Probity in analysis. So when we take it upon ourselves to analyze, first of all, we want to have a scientific rationality versus a social etiquette or a protocol or an advantage or, heaven forbid, a superstition. So we're grounded in hopefully scientific rationality. We want to be logical in our argumentation and conjecture. Obviously, since we're dealing with very little data, we're into model building, and there's going to be some huge conjecture in there. But we want to avoid biased misrepresentation, selective reasoning, logical fallacy, insufficiency of argumentation. So insufficiency, for example, if I stare up at the stars and I see 10 stars up there and somebody says, well, that's a bull and its name is Taurus. In the name of science, I might say, well, that's bull.
Yes.
but because 10 points isn't sufficient to draw. But I'm going to get the cosmologist on my back. So then we also want to be balanced. So we consider the pros of our theories, we consider the weaknesses, and we state any assumptions. So I'll give you an example on the assumptions side. There's been some excellent work by one of the doctors that works with truthers, Dr. Silkman, has done some excellent discussions, and try and borrow from that, although he'd be the authority to talk to. So the 7 loci test, for example, and the probability that given a 7 loci match, you've concluded that Teresa Halbach in fact died in the back of the RAV that day. Now, from a scientific perspective, obviously 7 loci, I without being a medical background, I can appreciate the 7 loci bearing out in a probability that I think he has cited. I've forgotten what it is. And others have cited that, in fact, the legal standard today is 9 loci, and I would assume that would even craft a tighter probability, or in other words, a highly improbable that the sample that you're using versus what's in the RAV would conclude a different person. But to go that next step and suggest that's Teresa Hallback would require that one look at the assumptions that undergird that. So we're assuming that the sample that we're testing against, that the chain of custody, the record, is in fact bona fide. So a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and you can have precise science around 7 or 9 loci. But if the assumptions are fraught with danger, then that could be where the problem lies. And Dr. Silkman has quite nicely put that forward. He's articulated it well.
Yes, I am familiar with our good friend from Adelaide, and do send him discussion bits for discussion every now and again, particularly on the Aussie ball tampering of a few years back. But I don't think anybody else will have a clue what the dickens I'm on about.
So this issue may not have been an issue were it not for, so in other words, the issue as in questioning the assumptions of the validity of the record, were it not for foibles in the death certificate.
Yeah.
So, and were it not for coincidence of another female of that age and size who happened to pass away coincidentally at that time. Not that those points have legs that one could, refute the theory on, but these, it draws more acutely the attention to these assumptions. Are we trusting the system that we're not trusting to give us the foundational work upon which we exercise the science to then conclude that this person died? We point to the assumptions. So key assumptions is key. We're transparent as to method. Here's how we got to our conclusion. Here's what we did. Now we factor in your favorite word there, parsimony or parsimony.
Yeah.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary explanation. So we admit that.
Is this going on to question 4 yet?
Question 3. So
sorry. I was going to say, as far as question 3 is concerned, I feel quite strongly that yes, there have been at times. I personally have had people say, "Well, I don't know if you want to discuss this and that and the other." Particularly, I've gone after Mike Hallback quite a bit, and I've tried to say, what he's saying in this interview is just totally bizarre. And other people have said, "Well, I don't know that you should be attacking the family," and I'm like,
right.
"Well, hold on a second. There's something really, really strange going on here." In other countries, like here in the UK, comments like similar to those have exposed the whole truth of the case. And I think you're right. I think there are people who, let me just bring that up again. Let me just read what you written. Are your analyses in any way inhibited by etiquette? Yes. Allegiance to the system? Yes. Allegiance to fellow truthers? Yes. Allegiance to social principles or expectations? Yes. If so, is your conclusion analytic or socialitic? I would say socialitic if I'm not wrong, but
yeah. So this is exactly as you dissected it. That's what how I would put it. Obviously, there's a tremendous responsibility if the analyses are wrong to the family, and we know that was an overplayed for many. That was an overplayed hand in trying to shut down debate. So there's a fine line between the unprettiness of science and social etiquette, right? So I would submit. I'll get to my answers, but there's a lot of what we do is not necessarily analytically pure. It's guided by social distortion. Yeah.
Question number 4, is it?
Yeah. Almost. So I'm just going to get to section 4 and then.
No worries. I'll get it set up ready. Okay.
That means they have to stare at me longer. So the macro lens. The interesting thing about the macro lens is it starts to lend credence to the plausibility of an alive theory. It doesn't prove anything, but certainly were it not for these foibles in the macro system, on the basis of parsimony, it'd be probably better entitled to stay in the microcosm and look at the whodunit, October 31, 2005 in Manitoba. Given the foibles of the system and this 40-year elephant in the room,
Yep.
The ambit of allowed theories expands accordingly. And again, we're trying to connect dots. So some of these foibles that I've got 20 listed here, and this is where the truther community would do a stellar job at. They could do it better than I do. I'll give you my 20 off the top.
Sure.
This was hastily put together, but the fallacious position of police officials and their official processes. Fallacious position of the FBI. So two interesting points there. The FBI itself was involved, and I believe we critique one of their analyses. But even beyond that, certainly enough has been uncovered here to cause a shutdown. The FBI is staying away from. Third point, fallacious position of the county and state courts. Conspicuous silence of the mainstream media, oddities in the family reaction and in their search, or perhaps lack thereof, as someone pointed out. Of course, any sightings of a TH lookalike, we've had some truthers come forward. Who knows? Important conflict of interest of county institutions, both at the county level and at the state level. Their investigators and courts, the county avoiding, and the state for that matter, avoiding financial repercussions, embarrassment, liabilities, and had safely kept collateral stories under wraps. Some would suggest if we uncover this story, then a greater puzzle starts to unfold.
Sure.
We've seen the state damage avoidance, evidence known to be tampered with, destroyed, unnaturally withheld, and interestingly enough, covered for. So there doesn't seem to be a voice of reason that comes out and said, well, that is a definite faux pas.
Can I just Jamie has asked a question. Is the 40-year-old elephant Kenneth Kratz? I would say no. It's the whole history of this case.
Yeah,
going back before 1985 and why they wanted to lock Stephen up in the first place.
Yeah,
we're going to get you for it whether you did it or you didn't, because we can.
Yeah. So it comes back to the vendetta pre-1985 that took on greater import. So suspicious benefits accruing to suspicious players. So one of the key things in modeling, of course, is the Latin term cui bono, who benefits, follow the money.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Lack of evidence of a death, or certainly a murder, or even a death, right? So those are odd. Coincidence of the Carmen Bootwell death at the same time. For me, that's a data point that I've got to try to. I'm looking to unpack that and understand whether that was just coincidence or certainly noteworthy. Coincidence in stifling the Avery bill by name, anyway, right on time. Coincidence and the precision of timing of the derailment of the depositions, right on time.
Yeah.
Success of key alignment of players. So behind Peg L comes Sun, right? So it is a bizarre, just to say the least, each of these points, and there are more. This is where the truth community could put these down, prioritize, and collate them. But there's definitely in the fabric of the mind space here, there's something warped in our view. So we consider this parsimony, the county conspiracy or a state conspiracy or even a federal conspiracy. The larger you go on that point, the more extraordinary the claim, and therefore requires extraordinary explanation. And I would argue, given the number of players that would be involved, that would increase exponentially when you move from county to state to federal. Now, having said that, parsimony doesn't give you license to take valid arguments off the table, right? So we have to be careful.
Yes.
So the retort I mentioned last time, this idea, are you a conspiracy theorist? I don't buy into, I don't subscribe to conspiracy theories, therefore I won't let my mind go there. I suggested last time that forecloses a lot of insight given the extensive amount of conspiracy that's just innate to humankind.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, it's a fair question. As you move up through those different horizons, the nature of the conspiracy would increase exponentially, and so therefore too must your argumentation. Now, in my submission, some players within our team have provided some really good explanation. Is it sufficient explanation? I think that's something that the crowd would have to study, understand, and then evaluate. But to remove it offhand, I don't understand. So if I throw some names out there, and I know there's some, I have to be careful in putting names out here, but certainly I've enjoyed Chad Keller's information, Juan Tescrew, who's under a code, and even and Richard Boyd did some great work on the RAV, and I know there's a bit of color attached to some of this orientation.
Mm-hmm.
But here's my take on that. So if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Fleetside, you're extremely ugly, and you should fly off a cliff somewhere," because you've missed these 5 points in your analysis. So the first thing I would do as a person of science, trying to be a Spock-like sort of behavior, is to establish whether or not the fact that I'm ugly and perhaps should fly off a cliff has any import to the Stephen Avery case in this analysis.
Yeah.
And I would suggest, obviously, it doesn't. If I'm ugly, it has nothing to do with that. But
and you're not.
And then I would immediately move on to the 5 points.
Yes.
Yeah. So because I'm not comfortable with the launch vehicle, doesn't give me the pretext to park the issues attached to it. Right. So distinguishing between attractiveness of presentation and just the objective questions within. And this is where hopefully we start to break down some of these boundaries. But again, the extent of emotional attachment to the diversity and the views is part of the natural learning and growth. So I'm not suggesting it's a bad thing. I'm just suggesting we need to think past it and look at the substance, not the glamour around it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So the question, so this is section 4, question 4.
Yes, here we go. Oh, sorry.
So the 3-part. Oh, that's it.
Sorry, that was. We'll just quickly read it, so because I just did it by accident. I just want to mention that I had dug fairly deep into the German a while back, and in looking into his wife through the years, I believe the wife is more suspect. Well, certainly, it's. I think the German is mentioned certainly in John Farrak's book.
Yeah.
And in Sean Atwood's book.
Yes. So that's a good example, and a question back would be, are you advancing that thought as a micro theory that as a separate random event that happened and that explains the events of October 31? Or are you saying that they would be in some way, I don't know, an agent for, or, so that doesn't preclude a macro orientation on that. Be interesting to see that, each of us has an important perspective that we need to look at. So the questions all spill the beans and as that uploads. So the questions are simply, are we open? So 4A, are we open to alive or not? B is, if not, given the macro perspective that we talked about, why not? We should try to strive to skeptically look at that and try to understand why not. 4C is recognizing we have a definition. I better set this up. So there's a 3-parter here in this third one. And the questions are basically, would they, could they, and did they? Now, who's the they, right? So I've got to explain the they. But let's assume for a moment, as a placeholder, that would be Peg Schlager or whoever your preferred syndicate is. Would they do it? And I take that to mean, would they have the motive to, say, relocate? So this is being the alive camp, alive, relocated. Would they have the motive to do that? The second parter there, could they do it, is looking at the means and opportunity to relocate. So between 1 and 2, we're looking at, that's your means, motive, opportunity. And then the third part is, did they do it? So would they do it, could they do it, and did they do it? And in my submission, the did they do it is the most fundamental question. So while in the micro sense, you would be saying, you're probably following who killed Teresa Hallback. In the macro sense, you're looking at who did it, as in who set this up. And again, not saying one's right, one's wrong, but this is how the two camps would divide.
So can I just hold it out? Apologies. Yeah. Everything froze my side about 2 minutes ago, and I've had to sort of reload everything. So I don't know quite how much we got there. Were we up to question 4? I was trying to load that. Can I do that now? Can I have a go at that again? Hopefully it won't all go pear-shaped like it did a moment ago. And I do apologize for that, because that wasn't what I was trying to do. I must have just been too quick on the button, as it were. Let me do that. Let me do this. So we were up to
question 4, yeah. So
question 4, question 1, question 2, 3, and question 4. Sorry to be a pain.
No.
Can I just get you just to run through?
Yeah. So question 4A: Are you open? Are you as a truther open to alive or not?
Definitely yes. Definitely yes.
If not, which would not be you, nor me, but if not, given the macro perspective, why not? So out of those that do feel inclined that way, and fair enough, try to tease out of them why, given the totality of the 40-year elephant in the room, they feel comfortable short-circuiting to that. And they may have a good answer. Maybe something that I'm missing. And then the C part, recognizing we have to explain what they is. So this part 1, 2, 3, the sub-elements of C. Would they do it? Could they do it? And did they do it? And
So can I just go back to one of the questions there? I'm just going to quickly call it up. Don't worry, I am still here. Are you open to the alive or not? If not, given the macro's perspective, why not?
Yeah.
Is it possible that from the lawyer's perspective, they cannot at the moment go down that road?
That's right.
That route. They can't say, we think that there's a possibility that she's still alive because all this has been litigated. But as truthers,
so perfect. That's exactly, and that's what I'm going to get into in a.
Sure. Sorry.
Absolutely. You're either falling into the trap or you've got it right. So I'm going to get into that exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Sorry.
No, it's good. So the sub question there, those would they do it, could they do it, and did they do it? So let's say a Peg Slaughter, for example.
Yeah.
Would they set up a relocation? Could they set up a relocation? And did they do it? Those are 3 separate questions.
Yes.
All right. So again, I'm not providing my answer yet, but now this is where I wanted to get. So you were absolutely bang on with that observation about K Zed, and that's a beautiful setup for section 5.
I'll get on the ball. Don't worry. So I will keep up, sir. Don't worry.
No. But that's not yet. Like we'll get to question 5.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So they have to endure my ugly face a little longer.
Not at all.
So the section 5 I call analyzing this thing called working through KZ. And I think this was a well-intended slogan. I just thought it was a very interesting wording. And my trouble is only with the word through.
Yes.
I like the other two. And just to preface this one, this would be a good one for Travis. We've enjoyed the benefit of his analyses many times, and he could speak eloquently to what we're about to get into, which was exactly where I think where your mind was going. So while we think the world of KZ without question, we need to realize, first of all, her exoneration track record is in the micro theater, like in that each of those crimes were sort of closed operation. They didn't tie back to a 40-year elephant in the room necessarily. Yeah. The second thing is I'm wondering again, Travis could enlighten us, but my sense she's procedurally locked in her argumentation to the micro level.
Yes.
That the pleadings or the structure of the analysis, the road she's allowed to walk down is necessarily locked to the micro. Third point in there, so work through KZ, I take that to mean constructively support KZ, which we're doing, and you guys are doing, everyone's doing. It's great support. But as truthers, we should be looking beyond that. So we should be not limiting our sights to the road she has to walk down. She is an important, probably, the vanguard and the most constructive vanguard to get to the truth. But she is not able to forthrightly just speak her mind. She's scripted by the legal process that we have.
Absolutely.
Now, in terms of KZ's analysis, then her standard is, I would assume, is the preponderance of evidence and beyond a reasonable doubt. So for the criminal standard, she's limited by court procedure and protocol, and her ability to prevail would be contingent on the integrity of the system, or probity, as we've said. So the assumption is there that at some court, sometime, she will eventually rise to the stature where there will be an objective read of justice, per the constitutional definition of what those courts are to be doing.
Yes.
Now, truthers, on the other hand, are in a different league, and this is where we have to treat our analyses responsibly. But our standard is modeling in the balance of probability, not beyond reasonable doubt. So much more open, more akin to, say, civil actions. And this is why our balance is very important. We have to make sure that we are self-disciplined to, given the freedom we have to connect dots, that we do this responsibly in accordance with sound analytic method. So we are not limited to procedure or protocol as she would be, other than that application of sound analytic method, and that's a self-discipline that we have to have. Now, truthers can and should also be looking at the system itself within which Ms. Zellner is locked. Yeah. So we are continuing to monitor, say, Judge Flowers, and we're assessing her findings just to see whether they resonate with probity, or are they providing alternatively a plausible, strained logic that allows someone to cling to taking no action in the case. Yeah. Is it a position of convenience? And I would suggest that if she gets that right or gets that wrong, if she gets that wrong, this will be fodder for textbooks internationally in legal, law school. Now, anything I've said in there, again, Travis would be the one to give us a better position on. But to date, we've already witnessed the procedure manipulation at the circuit court with
Yes.
where we're surmising that that's a manipulation. And but also of interest, we saw that strange thing with Brendan Dassey at the Supreme Court level,
Yeah.
which I mentioned last time is a foreshadowing we need to be careful of. So all the way up to the most senior court in the land, there were some oddities in how that came to a stalemate or a one in favor of taking no action.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the questions, and this is where question 5, if your software allows you to upload it, the question for truthers is probity of the courts part of your evaluation? If not, do you trust the system and including the courts to achieve the truth? And if so, do you believe this will be achieved within reasonable expediency? Will justice be achieved within, I use that term, reasonable expediency, given that we know that the 2 individuals incarcerated, their lives are extinguishing with every passing day, and so that the prize at the end of this thing is diminishing as if we're time barred from achieving justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. So,
absolutely. I would say it's probity of the court's part of your evaluation. I wouldn't trust any court. I think it's well known that there's a common saying, is there not, that Wisconsin courts are the best courts that money can buy.
Yeah.
If not, do you trust the system? Absolutely not. The courts? No. The judges? No. To achieve truth? No. If so, do you believe this will be achieved with reason? I think, as you said, justice denied, justice delayed, justice denied. I think that's a great.
And just on that part A. So
yeah, put it back up.
Yeah. So you were starting to say, the best courts money can buy, but but without even having to go that far, it is your society's duty to look skeptically at its institutions, with reasonable skepticism, to keep them honest. Right? It's the constitutional underpinnings that give them legitimacy are there for a reason, that guards against what would naturally be human behavior without them, right? So we should anticipate courts and governments and police and you name it are fallible, and so we continuously maintain vigilance as our civic duty to try and keep them on the straight and narrow. So it's in my view, it's legitimate to do that. Is the official process the court sufficiently robust to treat the macro circumstance? So will a court decide for itself that it is its probity is lacking? And then the C, question 5C, if not, in your view, and this is the key question, is Ms. Vellner's permitted line of reasoning sufficient to uncover the truth? I.e., can she go there, and is it appropriate to put all our eggs in that one basket? So drawing the distinction between wholeheartedly supporting her versus making that the myopic focus or opportunity for resolution here. That's what I'm teasing out in question 5. Sure.
It's interesting that, because I'm just going to close that one. I'm drawn to the fact that when I was in conversation with Sheriff Herman, he said that if any evidence comes to light of planting by any officer in his department, he would immediately. He said, "You can trust me. I will get in touch with Kathleen Zellner," which came kind of out of the blue. Mm-hmm. I think he's trying to suggest that there will be nothing. But for me, I think there's 3 problems here. There's the possible murder of Teresa, but then there's the framing of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey. And I think she's going down the route of prove that they were framed. That gets rid of the convictions.
So maybe Mr. Herman doesn't have her phone number.
Possibly, although I did send it to him.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. We'll cross that one off, just in the spirit of conjecture. But I mean, obviously, they're hugely vested, and in the U.S., this mixing between the probity of the institution for the Constitution and the politicization of the various different rules, that's a different balance in the U.S. than in, say, Canada, Scotland, Australia. Something to be mindful of, and some of our truther friends have opined that politicization is at the core of the 40-year elephant in the room.
Yes.
So the next point, section 6, the consequence of undue simplicity. So what if we, for those more inclined to stay in the micro perspective, what's the implication of that? And firstly, I would suggest, I mean, obviously, and again, they could be right, but there's the potential to distract the efforts of the herd, right? So we got a lot of people rowing together on looking for the appropriate themes to uncover. And certainly, if a micro focus were the only thing we were permitted to look at, that could be distracting our efforts. There can be damage to parties, as we mentioned. So we could end up naming individuals just to get around Denny, for example, to go from one to another, and everyone gets a turn in the hot seat. That's part of that is going to be, I think, Ms. Zellner's obligation. As truthers, again, though, we're in a different, we're looking through a different lens. Yes. It may serve also to soft land if there are systemic perpetrators at the larger level. I think this. I suspect the way this unfolds is we'll have a stalemate. So we'll have for those in the public that are sort of beside this file and not really tuned into the details of it, looking at it from afar, they would see a truther community and they would see a guilter community, and it's been a balance, and nobody can figure it out, and the courts can't seem to figure it out, and so eventually this soft lands as a stalemate. And I suspect where the outcome I see happening is eventually at some senior court level, far from where we are today, there'll be a statement to the effect we can't figure it out either. We admit we screwed up in limiting our investigation to Stephen Avery. We promise not to do that again the next time we frame Stephen Avery. Yeah. And nothing larger is going on here, move along, sort of thing. Yeah. And so the whole thing gets stalemated that way.
Would perhaps one of the hopes be, though, that in effect, as you mentioned, Kathleen Zellner's 20 previous exonerations were in this sort of micro theatre. Yeah. Could that prepare her more for this macro theatre? The fact that she's been there, done it before, and so she can see the bigger picture now.
Yeah. As an individual, her capabilities would be incredible, and she'd be the right person for the job. I'm just suggesting that what inhibits her is the protocol of the legal procedure she's locked in.
Yeah,
that would be more the concern than her. So in other words, in her mind, she would have a greater sense, like we do, of what probably happened, and yet her argumentation would be pigeonholed in the limitations of the micro per the pleadings and. But again, so this would be a good discussion with Travis. And so question 6 then.
Sorry, I'll get back to that one. It's here.
So assuming the macro is correct, could limiting ourselves to the micro perspective facilitate a soft landing of the system? That's the question out there. Mm-hmm. Do we see this ending with freedom of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey without reach back to the perpetrators? Will this be locked to the micro horizon and precluding any greater observations?
Yeah, I think the pragmatists over there in Wisconsin will be looking at this very carefully, won't they? And they will. I mean, it's part of their job, isn't it, within the government there to try and limit the damage that's being done. And yes, and to avoid a spotlight being shone on what their part of this whole process was, you know. So I think having Josh Call as the Attorney General. That's right, I've got it right for a change. You know, and that's Peg's son.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge problem that's going to be and his connection with the FBI. I think that for me those are my answers. I don't know, have I passed the test?
I think so. So I was just going to give the conclusion. I'll give you my sense.
Yes, please do. Yes.
So the conclusion is very simple. Diversity is the spice of life. I think hopefully nothing I've said in here is in any way diminishing or inhibiting anybody from pursuing their analytic best.
Yes.
All I'm hopefully doing is giving a rationale to break down any barriers that we may be seeing and to suggest that, diversity is good. It's each individual's opinion that matters. Now, without claiming any greater insight, I'll give you my answers to these, just in the interest of transparency. So question one, is the coincidence of derailment of the deposition, avoidance of the Avery bill, and the conflict of interest in the lawsuit an acceptable wager? And I would say clearly no. B, if not, in your mind, could this reasonably have been pre-planned? Absolutely, it could, right? So that just means the door is open to that possibility. It doesn't necessarily establish it was. But absolutely it could. Question two, are you observing and analyzing in the micro, the macro theater? So I'm very clearly in the macro, and I would claim that doesn't preclude the micro, that macro is all encompassing. That would be my cop out. But or put differently, I'm not inhibited from looking beyond the micro.
Yes.
Question 2B, if micro, is it reasonable to ignore the larger picture in your analysis? So I'm macro, so it's not applicable, but I would suggest no, it's not acceptable to take those off the table. So as we mentioned last time, anybody advancing a theory of an individual locked in a situation of October 31, 2005 in Manitowoc also has the burden to explain why they're dismissing this broader deception that would seem to be apparent. Is the basis of micro reasoning due to parsimony? So I've suggested that putting in there that the notion of a conspiracy theory or the system wouldn't do that, or how many people would have to be in on it. Each of those retorts is reasonable, absent that larger corruption and reasonable explanation that I think we have advanced in the truther community. So by my submission, those should be taken off the table. So parsimony should not be, in my view, used as a rationality to foreclose looking at the macro picture.
Yep.
If so, is that a sufficient basis to lower the horizon of inquiry? No. So 3, are your analyses in any way inhibited by etiquette? And that's allegiance to the system, allegiance to the fellow truthers, allegiance to society, principles, expectation. In other words, how you should think as opposed to how you do think. And my clear answer is no. And then in 3B, if so, is your conclusion analytic or sociolytic? So I'm clearly analytic. Now, he bravely said. So here's the problem with that. I am as human as everyone else. I'm as socially inclined as everyone else. And so the answers that I bravely put forward are a matter of me forever trying to check myself to make sure I stay true to that ideal, recognizing that I'm fallible in that regard as well. So question 4, are you open to a live or not? Yes, absolutely, I'm open to it. If not, given the macro perspective, why not? So it's not applicable. That does given the 40-year elephant in the room, how do we throw that off the table so that we can maintain comfort in a marketplace? 4C, recognizing we have to definitize okay, so this is the three-parter. Would they, could they, would they do it, could they do it, and did they do it? So would they do it? Yes, they would have motive to do it, absolutely. Could they do it? They would have means and opportunity. So there's your means, motive, opportunity. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Did they do it? I don't know.
Yeah.
And that to me is the singular question here.
Yes.
So rather than saying who killed Teresa Halbach, my question is, did they do it? And by it I don't mean a murder. Did they?
Who made it disappear?
Yeah. That's right. That's a good way of putting it. So question 5, is probity of the courts part of your evaluation? Yes. So recognizing the law and those uphold it. So the law, and again, I'm not the lawyer, and we can defer to discussions with Travis. But I'll throw this out on the table for discussion nonetheless. The law and those uphold it is a proxy for truth. We like to think they're principled, but they also have to operate. They're codified. There are many reasons why the laws that we follow aren't quite aligned 100% with truth. So there's a bit of they're a proxy for truth, not necessarily perfect. One could say that the laws are not perfect, but they are better than the alternative. And it's good to have that natural skepticism, the societal vigilance over our institutions to make sure they remain in bounds of probity. So if not, do you trust the system and including the courts to achieve truth? So I don't just trust the system. We have to analyze. If so, do you believe this will be achieved with reasonable expediency and justice? So I would go with a no on that. So my view...
we haven't seen it so far, have we?
I think eventually truth will prevail. And I'm not sure how much life will be left to, as part of the prize. That's the unfortunate dimension. Is the official process, the court, sufficiently robust to treat the macro circumstance? And I would suggest no. So if the macro were true, the underpinnings of the court system, if also politicized or whatever, it would similarly be an issue.
So therefore,
and if not, in your view, is K Zed's permitted line of reasoning sufficient to uncover the truth? And can she go there as appropriate to put all her eggs in one basket? So I would say she's severely inhibited from exercising her free judgment through this. Are we appropriate? Is it appropriate to put all our eggs in that one basket? No. Although it begs the question, what alternatives? And I'll conclude with one or two alternatives, but
sure.
It's the best vanguard we have to try and penetrate this thing and get to the truth. And she's an excellent resource to do that. So question 6, assuming the macro is correct, could limiting ourselves to the micro perspective facilitate soft landing of the system? I would say yes. That's exactly what it could facilitate. Do you see this ending with freedom for Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey without reach back to the perpetrators? Yes, I do. So it begs the question then, as just as a closing, and take any thoughts you have, Paul. But beyond the courts, what do you have, right? So we know that there is the political perspective, and that's already been touched at the state level, Governor. Outside of the U.S., there's Amnesty International that treats these sorts of situations. And I'm not suggesting that Amnesty International would take an application to go in and deal onshore in the U.S., but nonetheless, studying the standard that they uphold and trying to draw parallels can be informative. Ultimately, I think it comes down to the court of public opinion, and this is where the truthers continue to grow day by day.
Absolutely. It's as I said before, I think as you say quite rightly, Kathleen Zellner is dealing in this micro theatre of, proving that Stephen Avery was framed. Will we ever get to know exactly what happened? Yeah, I can't help thinking that you're absolutely right. There will be pragmatists there that will say it's time to cut our losses and just try and sweep this under the table. Whether that'll be a political decision. That will not be down to the courts, will it? The courts will sort of rubber stamp whatever's decided. But yeah, very interesting. I would like to thank you personally, and I'm sure everybody else listening, for what you've put together for us in these 2 articles. I think it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. Would you be willing to join us for a 3rd part and a future look at how things are developed after the state have responded?
Yeah. Well, this will be interesting. I mean, we're all waiting for a timely response. That'll be. But the quick answer, yeah, absolutely. We'll have more discussions, and I'm really looking forward to those well versed in the macro evidence, which I would suggest we've already seen. I think they'll come mainstream again, and I'm looking forward to that. And we'll see. Then we look at the totality, and we, as truthers, we continue forward and analyze, see where that takes us.
Well, on that final note, I would just like to say, as I say once again, thank you so much for getting in touch. Completely out of the blue, you got in touch, and it's been absolutely fantastic meeting you. I know we're 4,000 miles apart, but it's great that we can meet on a screen, despite the coronavirus.
Oh, yeah, and I've followed you and your colleagues there, and hello to them again. Every dimensions of this thing, the truth is putting forward wonderful work.
Yeah. No, fantastic. I'm going to say, well, if you would like to, I'll say cheerio, and I'm going to leave you to have the last word because you deserve it. Yeah,
just suggesting every idea out there is extremely important. I would propose that you exercise your own judgment. Don't jump on the bandwagon unnaturally. Don't be unduly challenged by what I have to say or inhibited. We're all equal minds in this thing, and don't be afraid of differences of opinion. I just hope that the different camps that are forming and any friction that may be in between them is simply a constructive means to enhance our learning. And with that, I thank you all very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much.